Right then guys, it's PSL here for the 15th episode in my Grand Prix World series, managing Stewart. And as you can see, with 12 rounds completed in the 1999 season, it is tied as the top of the Drivers' Championship. David Coulthard and Heinz-Harald Frentzen both have 48 points. Michael Schumacher is only 2 points further back. Wirtz, Hill, Fisichella, they're all still very much in contention with 4 rounds left to go in this season. Then you've got Irvine and Magnussen, the two drivers who, they're still driving for top 4 teams, they're still in a car capable of winning the Drivers' Championship, but I just don't see them doing it. Eddie Irvine has had the most bland, underwhelming, forgettable season ever, especially compared to his teammate, because Irvine's got half the points of his teammate. However, Eddie Irvine is at least ahead of Jan Magnussen, although, yes, Jan Magnussen, he's 8th of the top 8 drivers. I mean, I know that sounds kind of self-explanatory, he's 8th of the top 8, but what I do mean is that the top 4 teams, McLaren, Benetton, Ferrari and Arrows, are very much ahead of every other team. The only other driver who really comes close to that group is Jean Alesi. As you can see, Jean Alesi 9th in the Drivers' Championship. He's got 16 points. Then next, it's Shinji Nakano in a Sauber, who's got a quarter of the points that Alesi has. Jan Magnussen's driver stats are awful, absolutely awful. I think bar Tuero, possibly Nakano, Takaki, and certainly Alberto Marini, I think bar those drivers, he is the worst driver on the grid. Yet he still got 22 points. I honestly think Jan Magnussen has outperformed his programmed in driver stats. That was the case last year, but I think it's even more so this year. The press were once again pretty damning of the team. As you can see, Diniz and Takaki are both no longer on speaking terms with the rest of Stewart. Now that's not beneficial to anyone. I can understand their frustrations because collectively, individually, they're both funding the team for millions of dollars, but you can't just not communicate with the rest of the team through sheer frustration. You can't do that because, above everything else, they're both driving with us not only for the rest of this season, but also the entirety of next season. At some point, there's got to be some communication, some back and forth. They can't just not talk to us. When I joined this team, this was a slow team, the 8th quickest team, and it was making a loss at every race. We're still the 8th quickest team. However, we're making profits at pretty much every single race. Yes, we lost money during the Australian Grand Prix, but, you know, we had to travel all the way to Australia. I manufactured a 3rd car because I hadn't done that at the end of the previous season. And, you know, pre-season testing expenses, all of that. It was an expensive time, unsurprisingly, so I made a loss there. I made a slight loss, I pretty much broke even at the Brazilian Grand Prix, but at every single race after the Brazilian Grand Prix, I've made a profit. 62,000, 374,000, 348,000, just shy of $500,000 made at the Monaco Grand Prix. Yes, we're not scoring any points, we're not really getting up to much on track, but our bank balance is growing at quite a sizable rate. Look, $615,000 made at the British Grand Prix. However, it's getting much better because, yes, we're making money. That's good, but it is going to get even better from this point onwards because, well, in one of the many emails, there's a lot of emails actually, most of them slagging me off, yep. For example, emergency meetings with sponsors, yeah. Most of these emails are pretty damning of me, to be honest, although I do own the entire team, so no one can really do anything. They can't remove me, it's my team. But this was some good news. That loan, that multi-million-dollar loan I took out at the end of 1998, well, towards the end of 1998, just before the Belgian Grand Prix, that 12-month loan has just ended. It's just been paid off. That's the thing, I was making around $500,000 per race. Well, to be fair, that's maybe a bit over the top. Let's say $350,000, $400,000 per race. That's the amount I was making at every single Grand Prix. That was including loan repayments. And those loan repayments were about $550,000 per race. Do you know what that means? What that means is that now the loan's paid off, now I'm not paying $550,000 back to the bank per race. That means we'll be making about $1 million per race every race. More good news for our accountants is that FedEx have agreed to sponsor us for $2.6 million next season. However, I can double that because I'm going to turn our team sponsor slot, because no team sponsor is able to or was willing to sponsor us. So I can turn that team sponsor slot into a cash sponsor slot and have FedEx be our team sponsor. Of course, that means they'll only sponsor us for one season, but that's fine, because that $2.6 million has turned into $5.2 million. So let's head into another money-making opportunity. I mean, Grand Prix, race. That's what I mean, race. Although it is quite ridiculous, especially as we're a backmarker team, that we're making money at every single race we participate in. That really shouldn't be the case. Formula 1, famously, is a fantastic way to hemorrhage money. I mean, look at Formula 1 in the noughties. That was really the transition period, because by that point, by 2006, pretty much all of the privateers left. Minardi, Jordan. Tyrrell, of course, had already gone 40, and then you're going back to the real amateur teams. I mean, look who was competing in Formula 1 at that time. Williams, I guess, was still there, but BMW had entered and left the team. Same for Sauber, because of course by 2006 it was BMW Sauber. I think BMW owned about 80% of the team. It was a really large amount. Maybe all of it. But, you know, BMW were competing in F1 at that time, as were Toyota, Honda, Ferrari, Renault, McLaren, Mercedes. They were able to subsidise the losses because they were promoting their brand. That's how you can justify Formula 1. Well, I mean, I'm not an expert, but that seems to be how you can justify the entrance, the cost into Formula 1. You shouldn't be able to make money, not this easily, but we're doing it anyway. Let's head into the Belgian Grand Prix to see if I can fluke a fantastic result. Actually, no, that is better than I expected, slightly, but 14th and 15th, so what happened? Not much, actually. Well, nothing dramatic, there's no disqualifications. Hakkinen had a really poor qualifying session, so around Spa-Francorchamps, both Williams drivers were the slowest. By some margin as well, both Williams drivers were nearly in the 1 minute 55s. Mika Hakkinen was the next slowest driver. Yes, he's nearly 7/10 quicker than them, but he's a good, well, nearly 3/10 behind both Minardi drivers, and Marini beat his teammate by 4/10 of a second. Well, more like 3.5 actually, but even still. Emmanuel Collard, that's the shock. Emmanuel Collard down in 16th. I don't know what's happened actually. Nakano is in 12th, so it's not exactly an amazing qualifying session for a team which, once upon a time, was the next best. Although, well, I say that actually, I mean that very much depended on Jordan. But Sauber were able to fluke 6th, 7th, 8th place finishes, not today. Anyway, Michael Schumacher once again has taken pole position, Eddie Irvine in 2nd, Heinz Albert Frentzen in 3rd. Eddie Irvine has had a really underwhelming season. Let's see if this can be a turning point. Let's see if this can be a Grand Prix where Irvine even just finishes on the podium. That would be nice, or just beats his teammate, does something really of achievement. Anyway, it's Schumacher, Irvine, Frentzen, Wirtz, Coulthard, Alesi once again, fantastic qualifying position. He's in 6th, he beat Fisichella in the other Ferrari. Then you've got Magnussen in 8th and Esteban Tuero in 9th. Jordan, I don't know what Jordan are doing, I don't know whether they're still running a driver aid illegally. That could well be the case, because over the course of this season both Tuero and Alesi have been caught running driver aids illegally, and I don't know. I mean, there clearly is genuine pace from Jordan. There clearly is, because Alesi is too consistently quick. Tuero being in 9th is really quite something though. I mean, Esteban Tuero beat Damon Hill, who's down in 10th. Damon Hill should be the Drivers' Championship leader, no doubt about it, he really should. However, reliability has let him down, driver orders have let him down. Let's not forget the Monaco Grand Prix, where in Monaco, Damon Hill outqualified David Coulthard. He was running ahead of David Coulthard, yet finished behind him, only by 4 seconds. And I speculated that I think the team ordered Damon Hill to move out of the way for David Coulthard, because David Coulthard still to this day is the team's number 1 and Damon Hill is the team's number 2. Now that doesn't really mean much other than that Damon Hill has to move out of the way when told to. This poor qualifying result has nothing to do with that. Damon Hill, he's down in 10th. That's got nothing to do with reliability or team orders. That's just a really, really disappointing performance. So much for that. I was actually looking forward to the Grand Prix, but if it's going to be dry, there's nothing really to look forward to from my perspective, because there is next to no chance that I'm going to get a point from this Grand Prix. If it was wet, then it's possible I could have fluked something, but if it's dry, which it is, then there's absolutely no chance of me scoring any points at all. And with a crushing predictability, I was correct. Actually, I think it's worse than that, yes. Both of our drivers did retire, Pedro Diniz with a electronics issue, and Takaki with an engine failure. Actually no! Coulthard retired, that's big news, but then I noticed Frentzen retired as well. So both drivers who were tied at the top of the Drivers' Championship have retired. And that's even more shocking than you would think, because, well, of all the McLaren drivers to retire, you wouldn't expect it to be David Coulthard. Damon Hill this season has really borne the brunt of McLaren's reliability issues, but this time it's David Coulthard. Damon Hill actually finished the race, and that really shouldn't be an achievement, but it is. And Heinz-Harald Frentzen, yes, he's in the championship hunt, but that was only really due to reliability. Although actually the same really could be said for Coulthard, because Coulthard and Frentzen are both quick drivers, driving for quick teams, but they don't really have that killer edge. The only reason they had a points advantage was through a regularity of points finishes, compared to the likes of Damon Hill, Michael Schumacher, etc. Wirtz, of course. Actually, Wirtz did finish. Credit to him. Damon Hill has won the 1999 Belgian Grand Prix. Michael Schumacher is in second, so that means Michael Schumacher has taken the lead of the Drivers' Championship. Eddie Irvine finished in third, so congratulations to him. He beat Alex Wirtz, who's in fourth, Fisichella, who's in fifth, and Jean Alesi, in that Jordan, he beat Jan Magnussen. So Jean Alesi scored the final point, Magnussen scored none, as did Tuero, Montoya, Nakano. Actually, even though both of our drivers retired and we wouldn't have scored any points even if we did finish, I think we possibly could have snuck into the top 10. We were quicker than Emmanuel Collard in qualifying. Nakano was only 2 seconds ahead of his teammate. I think we possibly could have snuck into the top 10, which means absolutely nothing other than bragging rights. That's all it is, bragging rights, but it would have been, well, it would have been nice if nothing else. As I mentioned earlier, Michael Schumacher is leading the Drivers' Championship. Heinz-Harald Frentzen and David Coulthard are still tied on points. This time though, they're tied for second place, and I'm fairly certain Frentzen has overtaken Coulthard. I'm fairly certain it was the other way round. I have no idea how they've swapped, because I really don't understand how that's happened, why it's happened, but it has. Anyway, Damon Hill in 4th, Wirtz 5th, Fisichella in 6th, and Fisichella is still mathematically in contention, as is Eddie Irvine, as is Jan Magnussen, just about actually. Alesi no longer is, so Alesi is no longer mathematically in championship contention, but it is still technically an 8-way battle with only 3 races left to go. That is a supplier pulling out of negotiations, and it's nothing to do with us. Benetton. If Benetton weren't a computer-controlled team, they would be screwed. Absolutely screwed, because if that were to happen to me as a player, well, let me just set the scene. So Benetton, they were speaking to AGIP as a fuel supplier to get fuel from them for next season, but AGIP, they were speaking to Benetton and Prost at the same time. They only had one slot free, and they've sided with Prost. So Benetton haven't signed a deal with any fuel supplier, and the season's nearly over. Now, if Benetton were a player-controlled team, then that's game over, because if you don't sign a deal with an engine, tyre or fuel supplier, then it's game over, in essence. Game over, you start again, that's it. There's no moving on to the next season, you're done. But obviously, because Benetton are computer controlled, that doesn't happen, so they will, out of nowhere, they will find a fuel supplier. But Benetton have been done over by Prost. That's a big play. That's a really big play by both Prost and AGIP. AGIP turned down Benetton for Prost, which, yeah, sure, next season that's probably a good move, but for every subsequent season, I doubt it will be. Look at this! Look at this! Minardi! I told you pretty much every single team has filled up all of their sponsor slots. Minardi have done it. Who would want to sponsor Minardi? I don't know, but Minardi have attracted more sponsors than us. Okay, to be fair, Minardi have probably targeted a lot of 1-star, 2-star sponsors. They've probably been a bit more realistic, less ambitious, but even still. Oh look, and Sauber have done it, and Tyrrell have done it, yep, everyone's done it. It's only a 2 out of 5 sponsor, but $1 million, that's better than a poke in the eye, so I'll take that. And it's for 2 seasons. That's good, that's really good actually. I'm not a massive fan of multi-year deals with engine suppliers or tyre or fuel suppliers because, you know, 1 year the Mercedes engine can be amazing, the following year less so. So signing multi-year deals is, you know, it's an unknown quantity. But, you know, money's money. It's not like money ever goes bad. To guarantee money for multiple years, that's good. So yes, I will sign that deal. $1.1 million for 2 years. Yet more good news as Ferrari have given us an upgraded engine. Oh. That's actually quite disappointing actually, so it's better by 1 in responsiveness and 1 in rigidity. And that's it. Right, I'd rather the power have been improved or weight. Rigidity is a useful stat to a point. It is probably actually one of the most important stats in the entire game for your team to a point. If you've got low engine rigidity, you can't finish a race. So you do need some level of rigidity, but the difference between middling rigidity and maxed out rigidity is minimal. Probably not at all actually. Responsiveness is nice, but again I'd rather another element of the engine have been improved, but even still, An engine improvement is an engine improvement, and it's come in time for Ferrari's home Grand Prix, so that's fantastic. Let me just first off check though, so yeah, I thought so. Yep, that makes sense. So as you saw, we have got to the second model of Ferrari engine, but Ferrari have got the third model of Ferrari engine. Makes sense. I mean, Ferrari are going to prioritise Ferrari over Stewart. That makes sense, although, I mean, Ferrari prioritising Ferrari sounds ridiculous, but in the context of this game, makes sense. I mean, of course, next year, Ferrari are going with Mercedes, and that's arguably even weirder. Anyway, Ferrari have got the third model of Ferrari engine, we've got the second model, and we've got the improvement in time for Ferrari's home Grand Prix, so let's head on into it. I don't have to scroll down to see where both of our drivers qualified, so that in of itself is an improvement, and also it's a Ferrari 1-2. Then it's Damon Hill in third, Heinz-Harald Frentzen fourth, Eddie Irvine once again qualifying just behind his teammate, then it's Wirtz, then both Jordans, Alesi, then Tuero, then Mika Salo, then Nakano, then Montoya, then it's both of our drivers. There's quite a few big names not there, Magnussen being one of them. So, well, let's find out. So there's Collard, Hakkinen, Trulli, Marini. Magnussen, I think, has been disqualified. Must have done. And David Coulthard. I thought there was someone else I was forgetting. It's David Coulthard. Now, this is big. David Coulthard has been banned from taking part in the Italian Grand Prix. He didn't even get to line up on the starting grid for the race because David Coulthard has been caught with an illegal driver aid after qualifying. That's really not done David Coulthard's championship charge any good at all. At all, whatsoever. I just don't know why he'd take the gamble. That's really stupid. Really stupid. I can't fathom the logic for that. The only reason you would break the rules and run a driver aid illegally is because you're desperate, you're behind whoever you want to beat, or you're like us, you're a team who under normal circumstances wouldn't score points. You wouldn't run a driver aid illegally if you're very much at the front of the Drivers' Championship, because you stand very little to gain and, as we're seeing here, a lot to lose. David Coulthard cannot score any points from this race. However, Michael Schumacher, he can, and he's in a prime position to score the full 10 points. Heinz-Harald Frentzen, he might well break the deadlock with David Coulthard in the championship. All I do know is that David Coulthard is completely powerless to what happens in the Italian Grand Prix because he's taken the gamble. Maybe it wasn't his choice, maybe it was Ron Dennis's, but he's taken the gamble, it's backfired. The real question is, why did he take it? I know Jan Magnussen has also been banned after qualifying for running a driver aid, but it's far less interesting. Magnussen, I can see the logic behind it. Yes, he's in the narrows, but he's not an amazing driver. He's much better than his programmed in driver ratings, but he's still not amazing. He's plainly second to Wirtz. And recently, he's been struggling to score points. I can see why he would run a driver aid, but again, it's backfired. Looking at the race results, it does seem like it was quite a dry race. In two senses, it was literally a dry race, it didn't rain at all, but it was a Ferrari 1-2 off the start. It ended with a Ferrari 1-2. Michael Schumacher from pole position to race win. Giancarlo Fisichella, his teammate, backed him up, so it's a Ferrari 1-2. They must be looking in a very good position in the Constructors' Championship because, of course, only one McLaren driver competed in this race. That's Damon Hill, and he only finished in 4th. So Ferrari, I think, have taken the lead in the Constructors' Championship. We'll get that confirmed in just a minute though. But Michael Schumacher, he's won the Italian Grand Prix. There's only 2 races left. He was leading the Drivers' Championship, David Coulthard was disqualified after qualifying, so he couldn't score any points. Heinz-Harald Frentzen was in a similar position, 4 points behind Michael Schumacher. He's now 10 points behind him. Damon Hill missed out on a podium finish by just over 0.3 of a second. Eddie Irvine in the other Benetton yet again finished behind his teammate. He was in 5th, and Jean Alesi yet again scored more points for Jordan as he finished in 6th. As much as I mocked that Ferrari engine upgrade for being disappointing, it does seem to have actually benefited us. I mean, it's difficult to say, isn't it, because Magnussen and Coulthard, who both undoubtedly would have beaten us had they not been disqualified after qualifying, didn't take part in the race, so our finishing position is higher than it normally would be, although to be fair you have got to factor in retirements, and actually in this race there weren't many. Montoya retired with a hydraulics issue, Marini with an engine issue, and Collard with a driver issue, so there weren't any big name retirements from this race, although there were 2 big name disqualifications, so I think that kind of balances it out. There's the Drivers' Championship with Michael Schumacher at the top. Heinz-Harald Frentzen is only 10 points back, David Coulthard 14 points back, and Damon Hill 16 points back. Everyone else can't possibly win this season's Drivers' Championship. So, Ferrari have got one man in contention, Benetton one man in contention, McLaren both, but Arrow's none. Alex Wurz though, he still had a fantastic season, he's on 38 points. He's ahead of Fisichella, Eddie Irvine, his teammate, Kevin Magnussen, who has scored no points all episode. Jean Alesi, 18 points, he's catching up to Jan Magnussen. If Alesi beats Magnussen, then that will be some achievement for a Jordan driver to beat an Arrows driver this season. Bearing in mind how strong Arrows started this season, that'll be quite something. And anyway, then you've got Nakano, Salo, Tuero, Montoya, and Collard, of course. So Nakano's on 4 points, Salo and Tuero tied on 3 points, and Montoya and Collard are tied on 1 point. In the Constructors' Championship, Ferrari have overtaken McLaren to take the top spot, although there's only 4 points between the two teams, so it's still very much a 2-team battle. Although really a 3-team battle, because Benetton are only 16 points behind Ferrari. That's a 1-2 finishes worth of points. That's quite a lot to close up in only 2 Grand Prix, but doable. Certainly. And Arrows... Nope, Arrows are mathematically out of contention, just about actually, but even still, it is very much a 3-team battle. With 2 races left to go, 3 teams can still win the Constructors' Championship. 2 of them, not just mathematically, but realistically, can win the championship. So we're going to see it again for the 2nd year in a row. We are going to see a battle, and it's going to be a fantastic one, between Ferrari and McLaren. Frank Williams has done it again. He's firing people mid-season. Why is he doing that? Hasn't he learned that is something you only do in extreme circumstances, not something you do with 2 of your key personnel 2 years in a row? Frank Williams has fired Jacques Villeneuve with only 2 races left to go. Why? I mean, surely it's far more likely that Jacques Villeneuve would give up and walk away. I can imagine that, but why would you fire him? To be fair, Jacques Villeneuve has been worse than Johnny Herbert, although it's not really their fault. I mean, the team are in an awful position because of the chassis, I think, certainly because of Frank Williams firing Patrick Head. I mean, it's got nothing to do with Villeneuve. Yeah, sure, Villeneuve's more expensive than Johnny Herbert, and I think he's been, on balance, worse than Johnny Herbert, but why would you fire him? There's only 2 races left. How poor was the relationship between Williams and Villeneuve? Oh, I don't even want to say that surname, so that's Pierre Rainbow. That's Rainbow. It's gotta be. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's Pierre Rainbow, so like rainbow, but rainbow. That's weird. That's a weird surname, actually. Rainbow. But anyway, he's bought a seat with Williams, presumably. Well, logically, what I would do is get him as the test driver. Yeah, yeah, I thought Williams might do this. I thought they might do something completely illogical. They have, right. So Pierre Rainbow, he has got the driver number 1 seat, even though they have got Olivier Panis as a test driver, a backup, half-decent test driver. I mean, 5 out of 5 skill, that's got to be worth something. What is the point of having a highly skilled test driver if you don't use them in situations such as this? What's the point? It's just a waste of money. Because, I mean, in the real world, yes, Panis could offer up some help to Williams, like Kubica was doing last season with Williams in real life, actually. But in this game, there's no real benefit to having a highly skilled test driver, except in situations like this, where your driver gets injured, or where you choose to fire them for whatever reason. But why would you get in Pierre Rainbow? I mean, brilliant name, but why would you get in Pierre Rainbow when he's got all 1-star stats, apart from 2 out of 5 on overtaking? But why would you get in Pierre Rainbow into the driver number 1 seat over Olivier Panis? I don't get it. There's no... I mean, the only logic is that Pierre Rainbow, if he's in a race seat, he will be paying money to the team. If he's in a test driver seat, he doesn't pay. Pay drivers only pay if they're in a race seat. If they're in a test driver seat, you have to pay them. It could be a very minimal salary, but you have to pay them. They only pay you if they're allowed to race around a track. And somehow, Pierre Rainbow, he has been granted that luxury for the next 2 races of the season. And with that incredibly exciting round of news over with, I'm going to end this episode off here. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, be sure to leave a like, comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next episode, in which I'll be finishing off the 1999 season, and we'll be finding out who's going to win the 1999 Drivers and Constructors Championships. So, I'll see you guys then.